We all have things that we can be grateful for. When I was in the hospital, I had a choice to make. I could either wallow in my pity and be downtrodden and depressed about how my life has turned so dramatically, or I could look at all the positive things in my life and be thankful for them. And that's what I chose. I chose the attitude of gratitude. And by doing that, I have not only set myself up for future success, but I've also motivated and inspired others to do the same. Because when we think about it, even in this pandemic, you can look around and you can find things that you like. And when you think about it, things that you like are things that you appreciate and that you are grateful for. It all comes down to choosing to be grateful for all the big things and little things that you have.
Heroes are an inspiring group of people. Every one of them, from the larger-than-life comic book heroes you see on the big silver screen, to everyday heroes that let us live the privileged lives we do. Every hero has a story to tell, from the doctor saving lives at your local hospital, to the war veteran down the street who risked his life for our freedom, to the police officers and the firefighters who risk their safety to ensure ours. Every hero is special and every story worth telling. But there is one class of heroes that I think is often ignored: the entrepreneur, the creator, the producer. The ones who look at the problems in this world and think to themselves, you know what, I can fix that. I can help people. I can make a difference. Then they go out and do exactly that by creating a new product or introducing a new service. Some go on to change the world. Others make a world of difference to their customers. Welcome to The Hero Show. Join us as we pull back the masks on the world's finest heropreneurs and learn the secrets to their powers, their success, and their influence, so you can use those secrets to attract more sales, make more money, and experience more freedom in your business. I'm your host, Richard Matthews, and we are on in 3, 2, 1. Hello and welcome back to The Hero Show. My name is Richard Matthews, and I'm live on the line today with Chris D.T. Gordon. Chris, are you there?
I am, Richard. How are you today?
I am doing super awesome. Glad to have you here. You're coming in from Minnesota, and for those of you who've been following along with our travels, we are still stuck for our COVID crisis in Florida. Hopefully that won't last too much longer because we've been here since April. But how have you guys been doing up there in Minnesota, despite all of our global crisis stuff?
You know, we are in a rather rural area of Minnesota, so the pandemic hasn't hit us as badly. So we've actually been able to do a little bit of traveling. I have family in Michigan, where I'm originally from, and so we went to visit them for a week and a half, and we kept pretty secluded from other people. When the beaches got too busy, we left. We went to visit places that were either outside or had very few people, and we always masked up when we were indoors. So we're just making the most of it. Lots of bike rides.
What we're all doing, right?
Exactly.
Making the most of our pandemic. So I have a couple of things before we get into your introduction that I just wanted to point out, because we talked about these a little bit before we got on the show. The first one was you have 4 names, so Chris D.T. Gordon, and you had a fun reason for that. I wanted you to share that real quick because I thought it was pretty hilarious.
Well, thank you. Well, my parents were very forward thinking when they named me, and they didn't want me to end up in jail, as many assassins have 3 names. And so they gave me the name Christopher Daniel Thomas Gordon, so I would stay out of jail. You know,
so you wouldn't become an assassin, particularly.
Yes, exactly. When you have the last name Gordon, which is a first name, you're kind of setting yourself up. So they offset that by giving me 2 middle names.
That makes sense. And just, for clarity's sake, you haven't become an assassin, right? So it's worked out?
Well, not that you know of.
Not that we know of, not that you'd share either way.
Yes.
And the other thing was you are our first guest so far on the Hero Show who has showed up in a hero's outfit. What's the outfit that you're wearing here?
Yes, I am dressed as One Punch Man, who is famous in the Japanese manga and anime worlds. His real name is Saitama. And what makes him special is that he has the powers of Superman, or Superman and the Hulk, closer to the Hulk, unlimited strength. He can't be beaten, but he can't catch a break. He's like, he has Hulk strength and Spider-Man luck. No one knows who he is. Everyone gets the credit for his victories. And even when he tries to do something right, it somehow turns sideways on him. And some of the funniest moments are when he's not upset by an attack from a villain, but by when he's going to miss a good sale at the grocery store. And so
Nice. And so
it's a brilliant satire if you're into that.
sounds like something I would enjoy quite a bit. We'll see if we can find some links for it and put those in the show notes when we finish this episode if you're interested in watching it. I know I am. So what I want to do real quick is do an intro to you before we get into your story so our audience knows who you are. So Chris D.T. Gordon is a faithful husband, father of 3, online middle school special education teacher, a runner, a Taekwondo student, and a pop culture geek, obviously. And you're also a survivor of necrotizing fasciitis, which is flesh-eating bacteria. And you use your story and message to inspire others to adopt the attitude of gratitude and to positively affect their lives. So you do a lot of speaking engagements and stuff on those in those areas. So what I want to find out from you sort of is what you're known for now, right? So what's your business like? Who do you serve? Like, you know, what kind of audiences do you speak to? And like what's the primary message that you're trying to get out there?
Well, what I'm trying to get out there, Richard, is that we all have things that we can be grateful for. When I was in the hospital, I had a choice to make. I could either wallow in my pity and be a downtrodden and depressed about how my life has turned so dramatically, or I could look at all the positive things in my life and be thankful for them. And that's what I chose. I chose the attitude of gratitude. And by doing that, I have not only set myself up for future success, but I have also motivated and inspired others to do the same. Because when we think about it, even in this pandemic, you can look around and you can find things that you like. And when you think about it, things that you like are things that you appreciate and that you are grateful for. So, you know, it could be basically how your shoes feel when you put them on. As a runner, I love my running shoes. And so I love the feel of my running shoes. I love taking a big drink of water after a long run. I appreciate that. I am grateful for that. And it's, you know, even down to, you know, how it feels to watch a favorite show or a favorite podcast. And so it all comes down to choosing to be grateful for all the big things and little things that you have.
It reminded me of one of the things, you know, I mentioned earlier, we're still stuck in Florida, and Florida in the summertime is famous for their mosquitoes that'll come and take you away if you're not careful. And I decided that the way that I needed to look at that over the summer was that it's my contribution to a green earth is that I am supplying the food for an entire neighborhood's worth of mosquitoes all by myself.
There you go. You know, it's a circle of life. It all comes back to Disney. Disney runs everything.
They probably do at this point.
Yeah.
So what I want to find out then is your origin story, right? Every good comic book hero has an origin story. It's the thing that made them into the hero they are today, right? And we want to hear that story. Were you born a hero, or in your case, perhaps bit by a radioactive spider that made you want to get into the speaking business? Or did you start in a job and eventually move to becoming an entrepreneur? And basically want to know where you came from. And I know your story's probably got a little bit more pain in it than most people's stories. So I would love to sort of hear how you got to where you are now.
Well, I wasn't bitten by a radioactive bug. I was scratched by a bacteria-laden wall. In March 2015, I was helping my wife one morning take the kids down to the garage. We have a detached garage, and walking them to the van where she could take them to school. My wife is a high school teacher at the local high school, and she would drop the kids off at daycare and the kindergarten school. My oldest son was in kindergarten at the time, and our twins went to daycare. And so I was flying my younger son, Seth, back and forth to try to get him into the van. Well, I went too far to the right and scratched my right hand on the garage wall. I didn't think of anything of it. I put him in the car seat. I wished everyone goodbye. And then when they left, I went back into the house, cleaned up the wound, and started my day as an online school teacher. 3 days later, I wake up and I have a lacrosse ball sized bump on my right elbow. I go into the walk-in clinic here in town, and the doctor there takes a look at it and says, well, it might be bursitis. We want you to keep an eye on it and let us know if anything happens. Well, 10 hours later, that bump had transformed my arm into basically a giant sausage. It was triple the size of my left arm. For a comic book analogy, I was the Incredible Hulk in mid-transformation. My wife then took me to the emergency room after we secured a babysitter for the kids. And at that time, when they had started taking my blood pressure, they couldn't get a reading. I had gone septic. And if you're not sure what sepsis is, it's basically an overreaction of the body to an infection or to some kind of foreign element. And it basically poisons the body to try to get rid of that infection. So fast forward a little bit to the next morning. I'm still in the hospital. The attending doctor at that time comes up to my gurney and says, Mr. Gordon, this is beyond us. We can do nothing for you here. Where do you want to go? Immediately, I told them the Mayo Clinic for two reasons. First of all, it's the Mayo Clinic. When you're in the North, in the Midwest, you go to the Mayo Clinic if you can. And it's only 2 hours away from where I live. Secondly, my in-laws live in Rochester where the Mayo Clinic is. And my father-in-law at the time was a chaplain there. And so I knew I would have family there, and I'd have, someone watching over me spiritually and physically. And my wife and kids would have some place to stay for the few days it would take to handle this situation. Spoiler alert, it wasn't a few days.
Yeah.
Took a little longer, 65 to be exact. That was in the hospital. And the first 5 of those I spent in a coma. Basically, because they had to fillet me, and I use that term literally. They had to take the skin off my right arm, shoulder, chest, and back. And the infection. Here, let me show you a bit of what I'm talking about here. So you can see that, maybe you can see how the infection starts here at my hand and goes down, and then goes all the way through this area here. I even lost a nipple. So when I have my shirt off, it always looks like I'm winking. And then all the way through my back. And the infection went so far into my right arm that at first the doctors thought I would have to have it amputated. But the occupational therapist who was in attendance saw that I still had hand function. So what they did was they took a 15-inch by 4-inch flap of skin from my left thigh and placed it on my right hand. And so since it's my thigh on my hand, I call it my thand. I'm waiting for the patent to come back on that, or the copyright rather. So they and then they started doing skin graft harvesting and placement surgeries. And I'm not sure if you've ever seen a skin graft being taken. Imagine a souped up cheese grater running across your skin, pulling off the top layer of skin, and then they put that in a tray, and later on they place it somewhere on your body. And
that sounds horrifying.
I felt like Frankenstein's monster. And speaking of Frankenstein's monster, when they took the 15-inch by 4-inch flap of skin out of my left leg, they had to install knobs on either side of the wound, and then use a Jacob's ladder type shoelace pattern to tighten up the wound. And as a runner, I have somewhat large thighs. They had to take out a muscle. They removed my vastus lateralis from my left quadricep. So my quadricep was now a tri. I turned my quad into a tri, and I have my fan, and I'm looking like a discount Deadpool, basically.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. My brother's got a try on his left quad from a motorcycle accident.
oh, does he? Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I've actually seen what that looks like on the when you're missing that muscle.
It's a little weird when you're wearing tights because there's a little divot there, but it
Yeah,
makes a really cool scar that only a few
yeah.
people see. So
So the necrotizing fasciitis is eating the muscle under your skin. Is that right?
it's eating the tissue and the skin, the underlying tissue, and some muscle. It really didn't affect any of my muscle so much as it did the skin and the fascia underneath the skin.
So just because I'm curious, did you have to have the house come and inspected to remove whatever the like so you don't have this problem happen again?
You know, they found out that what it was is it was caused by strep, group A strep, and the bacteria is called Streptococcus pyogenes. So
Hmm.
it wasn't that we had to have the house fumigated; we just had to make sure the strep was out of the system. And we didn't have it sprayed. That's a very good question. No one's ever asked me that before. But it was really rare that it happened because usually people who contract NF are people with immunodeficiency syndromes, people with diabetes, uh, people who don't run 5Ks in less than 20 minutes, which is what I was able to do the week before I got sick. In fact, my plastic surgeon uh, told me when I asked him what were my limits, he said, "Well, Chris, you're the first marathon runner that's ever had this, so you tell us." And so that told me that I was basically in a rare category.
So, fast forward to today, what's your 5K time?
It's actually that was one of the times that I one of the personal records, the PRs that I set. I have since my discharge, I have set or tied 4 all-time personal records or PRs, and the 5K was one of them. Under 19 minutes, in fact. I've also done it in the
And you can do that
10K.
with only a try on one of your
Yep,
quads, huh?
with only a try and a thand. Also the 10K, the 10 mile and half marathon. I eventually would like to qualify for Boston, but I am horrible at the marathon.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
always been a race I've never comparatively done well in. Now, some people, I tell them my time, and they're like, "I would kill for that," and I say, first of all, don't. It's not worth it. Secondly, I
They might
understand where they're
have three
coming
first names
from.
though. They'll become an assassin.
I know exactly, but I would dishonor my parents greatly. Um, but secondly, you know, when you compare, my other race times to the marathon, you would think I would run faster, and that's where I'm going from. I'm not speaking from an you know an area of egotism. I just feel that I should do well in these races. If I do well in these distances, I should do well in this one. Well, it's not the case. I have to work a little harder on it, and I'm used to hard work, so that's okay.
Makes sense. So that's a super fascinating origin story. And of course, so you've used that story now to become a speaker where you're teaching other people how to sort of have gratitude in the midst of, you know, incredibly difficult situations. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
So
Yes.
what I want to talk about then is sort of how you've developed your superpowers in this space, right? So we say every iconic hero has a superpower, whether that's a fancy flying suit or in your case, perhaps a thand. Then, in the real world, heroes have what I call a zone of genius. It's a skill or it's a set of skills that either you were born with or you developed over time that energize all your other skills, right? This superpower is what sets you apart and allows you to help people to slay their villains and come out on top on their journeys. So through all of this, what do you think your superpower is? And it's something that you were born with or that you've developed since your accident, those kind of things.
I believe mine, Richard, is the attitude of gratitude. And I've always tried to be a grateful person. That was instilled by my parents, who also didn't want me to be an assassin.
Yeah,
But
that's an
when
important bit.
it's huge. Um, but when I awoke, the first few days after my coma, I started taking stock of all the things that had happened. And like I said before, I had two paths to travel. I could either go down the depressed path and, be basically, be, act in a way that would be a slap in the face to anyone who's helped me in this endeavor, because many people stepped up to help me and my family. People donated food, they donated toys to my kids. I have several colleagues from my school who actually live in the area, and they drove to my in-laws' house and dropped off a ridiculous amount of toys to my kids, and which is incredibly kind. I had people donating to a GoFundMe account that a friend of my wife set up, and which actually helped offset some lost wages because I had run out of sick days. There were so many instances of people showing me kindness that if I were to become depressed or develop a woe is me attitude, that it would be disrespectful to them. And so I chose instead to look at all the great things I had in my life. Obviously have my family, my friends, my faith, my job, my house, but I started looking at the small things. I really enjoyed the fact that at this time, the first season of Daredevil was released on Netflix, actually while I was in the hospital. So I could enjoy that whenever I wanted to. I enjoyed the ridiculously good pizza they had at the hospital. You wouldn't think a hospital would have good food, but man, their pizza was spectacular. I don't know if it's because I hadn't had pizza in weeks. At the time I was eating it, it was really good. Um, I took appreciation of the fact that when the sun was going through its daily travels, that it wouldn't shine in my face, because my bed was situated in a way where the sun was going to glare in my, in my peepers at 2:00 in the afternoon. It's all those little things that we take for granted usually that I started keeping track of. And the more that I found that I liked, like I explained before, I was grateful for. And I've turned that into a message to share with people that, first take count of all the great things you have in your life. Because when you think about it, you have some pretty awesome things that keep you happy, that keep you from climbing the walls. And, you have to not overlook those. And then we talk about, acknowledging the appreciated. Let people know why you appreciate them, whether it's your wife for cooking a fantastic meal, or is it the person who held the door for you as you're walking through it with your hands full of groceries. By letting people know that you appreciate them, that not only makes you feel better, as studies have shown, but it also helps them out because they could be having a bad day too. And just that thank you can make them feel better themselves. And then there's finally, giving someone else something to be grateful for, doing something else for someone that could maybe, could be costing a few bucks or $0. A couple of weeks ago, our neighbors just had twins. And as a father of twins, I know I have a good idea of what they're going through. And so I mowed their lawn. It cost me nothing. And I actually have an electric mower, so it didn't cost me any gas. But it helped them out greatly because it was one fewer thing they had to worry about.
Yeah. It's one of the things that I've always, especially, I would imagine it's even more true when you're looking towards healing from something as traumatic as necrotizing fasciitis, is that I talk about a lot in the business sense that, hey, you have to learn to be content where you are, but you have to know where you're going. I call it contented ambition.
Mm-hmm.
That you're like, it's if you don't learn how to be content with what you have and what you're doing and where you're at in your business or in your life, then it's really difficult to go somewhere. And at the same point, if you don't have a destination, if you don't know where you're going, it's also really hard to go anywhere. So you sort of have to have both, right? You have to have that contentment and that gratitude for where you are and what you have. I mean, you have to have a destination, right? You have to be like, I'm looking forward to healing my body and getting to the end of this journey, right? And learning how
Yes.
to do those things. So anyways, um, it's really fascinating to sort of see how that same mental game has to be played even when you're talking about health, um, as it does when you're talking about other aspects of your life.
Yes, and it's funny you mentioned that because I was listening to a podcast called The Brendan Show, which is hosted by Brennan Burchard. I'm not sure if you know that
Yeah,
name.
I do.
In fact, he talked about one of his podcasts was talking about being happy, and he said that
Mm-hmm.
you can be satisfied with what you're doing and still want to improve it. You know, and at the time he was talking at a seminar he was giving, and he said, "I am totally satisfied with how this is going. There are so many things that could be better." So, you know, being satisfied doesn't mean that everything's perfect. Being satisfied is you're happy with what is going on now, but you still want to make it better.
Absolutely, right? You have that contented ambition. You're content with where
Yes,
you are, and you know where you want to go, right? You know what
exactly.
you can improve and how you want to get better. And I assume the same thing applies. You said you're a marathon runner, right? It's, you can be satisfied with your time, but no, hey, I could shave a couple of seconds off that next time we go around.
Exactly.
So, the flip side then of your superpower, right? If your superpower is the attitude of gratitude, is the fatal flaw, right? So every Superman has their kryptonite, right? Or Wonder Woman can't remove her bracelets of victory without going mad. I'm kind of curious what the one fist guy, what his weakness is. So maybe you can share that in a minute. But you probably have a flaw that's held you back in your new career as a speaker. Something you've struggled with. Maybe it's perfectionism, something I struggled with, keeps me from shipping, or lack of self-care that, lets your clients walk all over you. That's another thing that I struggled with as I built my business. But more important than sort of what the flaw is how you've been working on fixing it yourself. So you can overcome it. And people who might be listening to us who've suffered from the same thing might learn a little bit from your experience there.
Definitely. Well, I have to tell you that one thing. Wait, hold on. What? What? Shiny objects are my kryptonite. I have goals. I have ambitions. I have dreams. But once in a while, you get those shiny objects that catch your eye and you want to check them out. You think that this will help you get to another level, but then there's another shiny object and another one and another one. Ugh, those drive me batty. And so what I've been really working on is trying to focus on 5 vital functions, 5 right there, that I need to do to move my progress forward. And if something doesn't fit into one of those 5 categories, it's out of there. And so
Yeah.
that would have to be it. Is that I want, there are a few things I want to do well, but there's so many other things that, that look good or that sound good. But if they're not working in those 5 categories, I need to be better at saying no. Many thought leaders have said that the most successful people are the ones that say no most often.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because
Right.
because when you say yes, you're saying no to something else. And if you say yes too much, you're going to find yourself not making any progress.
Yeah. I have a friend of mine who worked with Fortune 500 companies and their CEOs, and she said one of the things that it was very, very common amongst the multimillionaire CEOs of big companies was they knew what their one thing was, and they said no to everything else.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a classic like success thing. And I know for me, like early in my entrepreneur career, the first 4 or 5 years, one of the things that I struggled with a lot was that shiny object syndrome. And it wasn't until, so like I had defined this idea early in my career, but it wasn't until I started running everything that I had that came in front of me by this idea that I started to actually like overcome it. And for me, it was that I wanted everything that I did in my business to support my ability to spend lunchtime with my kids.
Mm-hmm.
Right, that was like my big goal. I'm not sure what's gonna happen once they all grow old and move out of my house, but for the time being, it's like I want to be the kind of dad who could have lunch with my kids every time. And I remember thinking that to myself when I just had my first son, who's going to be 11 here in a couple of months, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a few years to like actually start doing that, but it's the same kind of thing, right? You said you had five things. Mine was like this one rule is like, does this help me have more lunch with my kids, or does it not help me have more lunch with my kids? And that's like the question I ask myself for every shiny object that comes my way. It allows me to say no a lot more often than I used to, right?
Yes.
And because I used to say yes to all sorts of things, um, and now I say no a lot more often. And as a result, I am wealthier, and my business is growing more, and it's a much it, I enjoy my life more. So, anyways, it's an important skill to learn how to say no.
Yes. Yes, it is. Ironically, you say no to it. Or, yeah,
I
you say
know
yes
it's
to
weird,
no.
right? It's you say yes to saying no.
Yes.
Um, so So my next question for you then is about your common enemy, right? And in your case, I want to put this in context of the audiences that you speak to. But every superhero has an arch nemesis, right? It's a thing that they constantly have to fight against in their world, right? So in the world of business, it takes on many forms, but generally speaking, it's in the context of your clients. So for you, the people that you speak to in when you get up on stages, or I guess now in the midst of the coronavirus, when you get on Zoom calls with
Mm-hmm.
groups of people, right? It's a mindset or a flaw that you're constantly having to fight to overcome so that the people who hear you can get better results, or cheaper results or faster results or a higher degree of results. What's that one mindset that you're always seeming to run into or seeing people struggle with the things that you teach?
I think it's the the naysayer, and that you can say, well, I like be thankful for all that you have, but and I really haven't run across this yet, but I just imagine someone saying, well, everything around my life sucks, and you can bring up, what do you like to eat? I don't like anything. It's that person that's
Met
choosing
people like that.
not to do that. Yes, exactly. And at some point, you have to understand that I can either, spend all my energies on this one person who is choosing to do that, or I can, take a line from Star Trek and say the ways of the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, especially when
Mm-hmm.
this person is choosing that. However, I could also say, well, you must like being negative. So there's something. You can be thankful for being negative. And so, there's always a
And
way
maybe they'll
to,
turn it around on them.
yes, so you could always find a way to defeat a villain. But thankfully, I haven't run across that yet. But, I just think that there's always, like I just showed, there's always a way to work around or through a problem.
Well, so then the I think probably a more interesting question to answer would be the flip side of your common enemy, which is your driving force, right? If your common enemy is something you fight against, your driving force is something that you fight for. So just like Spider-Man fights to save New York, or Batman fights to save Gotham, or Google fights to index and categorize all the world's information, what is it that you're fighting for in your new speaking career?
Well, to speak, I guess broadly, is to make a better world. But to be more specific, I would say to have people develop a more positive outlook. Because when you have a positive outlook, you have a positive life. And so by seeing things more positively, that gives you the options to explore other avenues, because if you if you're saying that, oh, everything is bad, you're going to have that negative mindset. Oh, nothing will be good for me. But say if, for example, you're trying to lose weight and you say, wow, I have these walking shoes that are very comfortable. Why don't you use them? Go walk go walk in them, and and appreciate how far you can walk, and then maybe extend that a little further. When I started running after my hospitalization, I ran 1 mile, and it was the worst mile of my life. And I needed to get that one under my belt. Now, it's because the worst is always the first is always the worst. But after I did that, I realized, well, I'm going to have to just break this up. And so I started running 1 mile, running 1 block, walking 1 block. And at that time, my running was a little more like glorified walking, but I had to start somewhere. So I would walk, run, a block each. And then I started running 2 blocks, and then walking 1, and then 3, and then 4, and then 5. And so had I come out of that first mile and said, well, I'm never doing that again, that was horrible, I wouldn't have been able to accomplish all that I have. But by looking at it and saying, wow, I just did a mile after not running for 3 months. It was horrible, but I know that there are better miles behind me. There are better miles ahead of me now.
Yeah. It reminds me of my when I started doing it was a couple of years ago now, but I started doing what do they call it, calisthenics, like body weight training.
Yep.
And started with push-ups, push-up training, and they had all these things like, hey, you could do push-ups and sit-ups and squats and all these other things, and I was like, I just want to get back in shape, so I just started with push-ups. And I remember it was like, they were like, do 50 push-ups. I was like, that's dumb, I'm not gonna be able to do 50 push-ups. So I was like, the first day I was like, I could do 5, and the next day I did 6, and the next day I was like, yeah, I could do 10. And it was amazing to me, by the time I got to like 3 months in, I could do 100 push-ups a day, no problem, like in a row. And you get to the point where you're like, I'm doing 25, narrow push-ups and 25 wide push-ups and 25 Spider-Man push-ups and 25 something else. And it was like, your body responds so quickly to those kind of things when you break it up and give it some time to grow. But if you start off like, hey, I'm going to do 100 push-ups today, from nothing, it's very, very difficult to achieve that.
Yeah, I always think of What About Bob? Baby steps. So, just gotta take it easy and give yourself time to grow. But it's like what I was getting back to, that positive mindset can set you up to accomplish so many things. Yesterday, in fact, I received word that I achieved my recommended black belt in Taekwondo. And I had started.
Awesome. Congratulations!
Thank you. I had started after my hospitalization. My son joined in the fall of 2015, and I told my wife, if he sticks with it for a year, I'm going to ask him if I can join, because I had been in Taekwondo when I was younger, but like a stupid kid, I quit. But it's always been my secret desire to always earn a black belt. And over the years, I've become more increasingly goal driven. And so when it came around, that year came around, and he was still in it, I asked him if I could join, and he said yes. And so our master graciously allowed me to join in with him because of my prior experience. And so we've been doing it for a number of years now, and he still has to do 1 kick to get his, but I just received word that I received my recommended black belt. And it's because I had that positive outlook that, it doesn't matter that I'm in my 40s. It doesn't matter that I almost died and I have fewer muscles than I did when I did a few years ago. It doesn't matter that I look like a discount Deadpool. I have all these other things going for me, and I'm going to use them as well as I can. And I thankfully have achieved a lot.
Yeah, that's really cool. So just out of curiosity, how old is your son now?
He's 11. He's a little older
same
than
age
yours.
as my son.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's cool. How's he doing with the Taekwondo? It's one of the things we've been talking a little bit about, maybe doing some sort of Taekwondo or martial arts of some sort, something he's
He,
really enjoyed.
yeah, he really likes it. It's been really weird during the pandemic. We haven't been able to go to a lot of classes, but they've started classes up again, and so we're gonna get back on that horse, so he can get his kick done. It's a slow motion front kick that I had to work on. When you're 46 years old and you're a runner, your hip flexors aren't very flexy. So
Yeah.
I spent a lot of this pandemic working on my flexibility, and doing lots of different stretches, and thankfully it came through for me. So
Yeah.
we'll get back into it, and we'll be able to accomplish that goal pretty soon here.
Yeah, my son and I are talking about potentially. So we've talked a little bit of martial arts, and the other thing we're talking about is potentially learning some sailing stuff.
Oh,
So
fun.
we're talking about getting a little like 11-foot, like they call it a skiff, I believe. It's a little almost like a flat boat with you can pop a sail into it. We can put it on top of our car and take it with us while we travel,
Cool.
and we could learn to sail on that. And we think that'd be a fun athletic hobby to get into.
Yeah, sailing's a lot of fun. I haven't done a lot of it, but when I have, it's always been challenging, but always a good time.
Yeah. So anyways, we're in the process of trying to decide what kind of things can we do while we travel.
Mhm.
So anyways, I want to talk a little bit about some practical things, right? So I call this section the hero's tool belt. And just like every superhero has a tool belt with awesome gadgets like batarangs or web slingers or laser eyes or a big magical hammer or one punch fists. I want to talk a little bit about something that for you, something that's a practical tool our audience might be able to use for working on or getting that attitude of gratitude to help grow their organization or their business. Some things that they can practice or do on a daily basis that would help them achieve that attitude.
Well, you can take the phrase "the attitude of gratitude" and shorten it to the word tag. And we've all played tag before. And you can exercise the attitude of gratitude by playing tag. You can pretend that you are it, and you first think about some good things in your life. We could go with the big ones, but you could also go with the small ones. Like I like how well these gloves fit on my hands. I really appreciate that picture of the Ninja Turtles with Deadpool. You can look at those small things that you can seemingly overlook, but take appreciation of them. And then the A is you acknowledge the appreciated. You let someone know that you appreciate them and why you appreciate them. And you can start building that gratitude within them as well. And then there's the G. You give someone else a reason to be grateful. Like I mentioned before, I mowed my neighbor's lawn when they were busy with their babies. My other neighbor was gone for a couple weeks, so I mowed his lawn so it didn't look like the house was vacant. Whenever I go for a run, I usually try to pick up as much trash as I can on my way. I talk with the people at the store, at the restaurant, when you can go to a restaurant safely. And I let them know how much I appreciate their hard work. And when I have a chance to tell them, I say, hey, you know what? You're it now. I want you to think of some things that are good in your life. Let people know how you appreciate them and give someone else a chance to be grateful. And so by playing tag in that manner, you can spread the attitude of gratitude out more and more, and hopefully it'll catch on as well as COVID-19, honestly. With many, hopefully, fewer painful, side effects.
Experiences. Yeah. So let me just recap that real quick. So the T is basically like take what do you call it? Like inventory of something that you appreciate. And so then the A is acknowledge someone else.
Yep.
And then someone else is give someone a reason to be grateful, right?
Yes.
Was the last one. Is that right?
Yes.
That's a cool little mnemonic for helping people. And this is something that you practice every day, and you recommend other people do the same kind of thing.
Yes, and that's basically, and it's basically what my talk is about, is using that.
So just for people who might be, what would the word be? Skeptical of what the attitude of gratitude might do for them. What kind of like actual life results happen as a result of learning to have that kind of gratitude and learning how to do these kind of things and practice them on a daily basis?
Well, personally, I look at myself, and I have to be honest. I have achieved some pretty cool things in the last 5 years. I don't try to focus too much on it because I don't want to become egotistical. But at the same time, I have surpassed the prognoses that I was given. I mean, I was told in the hospital that I would basically be able to feed myself with my arm, and that's it. And now I can do at least 25, when I'm feeling good, 25 pull-ups on, go all the way as far as I can, because this arm doesn't stretch as well as this one because skin grafts are tight. But I use myself as an example. When I was in the hospital, if I had become morose and negative, I wouldn't have thought of what was possible, because a negative person does not think of the positive possible. So, right there, I'm an example. And you could also point to numerous studies that show gratitude has positive effects on not only the body physically, but the mind psychologically. It's been, like, for example, there's a 2006 study that showed that gratitude reversed or at least delayed the effects of PTSD in Vietnam veterans. And so you can, like you said, go to Google and just type in benefits of gratitude, and you'll find numerous studies talking about the benefits of practicing that positive outlook and being grateful for what you have.
Yeah, absolutely. And I can speak to the same thing. It's one of those once you sort of learn how to be grateful for what you have, so yeah, sorry, we're in the middle of a lightning storm that just started, and we just lost power for a couple of seconds, so it all came down and came back up. I connected to my cell phone for a second. Hopefully it'll continue working. But Florida has this whole thing with the storms. But yeah, one of the things I've been really I've been impressed with how well I've been able to grow my business by learning how to have that same attitude of gratitude, essentially.
The Hero Show will be right back. Hey there, fellow podcaster. Having a weekly audio and video show on all the major online networks that builds your brand, creates fame, and drives sales for your business doesn't have to be hard. I know it feels that way because you've tried managing your show internally and realize how resource intensive it can be. You felt the pain of pouring 8 to 10 hours of work into just getting 1 hour of content published and promoted all over the place. You see the drain on your resources, but you do it anyways because you know how powerful it is. Heck, you've probably even tried some of those automated solutions and ended up with stuff that makes your brand look cheesy and cheap. That's not helping grow your business. Don't give up though. The struggle ends now. Introducing Push Button Podcasts, a done-for-you service that will help you get your show out every single week without you lifting a finger after you've pushed that stop record button. We handle everything else: uploading, editing, transcribing, writing, research, graphics, publication, and promotion, all done by real humans who know, understand, and care about your brand almost as much as you do. Empowered by our own proprietary technology, our team will let you get back to doing what you love while we handle the rest. Check us out at pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero for 10% off the lifetime of your service with us, and see the power of having an audio and video podcast growing and driving micro celebrity status and business in your niche without you having to lift more than a finger to push that stop record button. Again, that's pushbuttonpodcast.com/hero. See you there. And now we're back to the Hero Show. So it's a potent skill. So my next question for you, though, is about your own personal heroes, right? So every hero has their mentors, right? Frodo had Gandalf, Luke had Obi-Wan Kenobi, Spider-Man had his Uncle Ben. So I want to know, who are some of your heroes? Were they real-life mentors, speakers, or authors, maybe peers who were just a couple years ahead of you? And how important were they to what you have accomplished so far in getting your speaking career going?
Always I credit my parents, especially my dad, with helping me develop the person that I have become. He was always very kind to people and hardworking, and showed me overtly and covertly how I should treat others and treat myself. For speaking, I looked at the teachings of Brendan Burchard, whom I referenced earlier, and also Darren Hardy. He's the author of The Compound Effect, and I take their teachings and try to use them to guide my actions, not only professionally, as a speaker, but also as a teacher, and also as a husband and a father, to make sure I'm hitting on all cylinders there. There aren't other people specifically that I look towards as heroes, but you always try to look for resonant actions over a broad spectrum. And so I just look for the actions that people try to take that have proven well for them as a group, and try to adopt those. Like for example, when I'm finished with a speaking engagement, writing a thank you note to someone. And I would always say thank you and drop a new email, but like writing a handwritten thank you note to the event provider or the event coordinator. And so those are some of my heroes.
Yeah. I love that idea of writing thank you notes. I'm in the process of learning how to do some black letter calligraphy, so I can add some more handwriting, thank you stuff to the work that I do, which I think will be a benefit for a couple of reasons. One, because I think it's a fun little piece of skilled art to learn, but also because there's a lot to be said for showing the people that do business with you how grateful you are that they chose to work with you.
Yes.
Or chose to have you speak, or chose to come on your podcast, those kind of things. So I want to talk about one more thing before we end this interview, and that's your guiding principles, right? So one of the things that makes heroes heroic is that they live by a code. For instance, Batman never kills his enemies. He always brings them to Arkham Asylum. So as we wrap up the interview, I'm going to talk about the top 1 or 2 principles that you use in your life regularly that really help you grow your business and help you, get onto more stages or get into more virtual Zoom, Zoom speaking engagements in the middle of our pandemic. What are some of those principles for you?
Well, I think first is the attitude of gratitude. That just guides my actions, not only as a speaker, but as a person. So practicing that every day. But also, it's the phrase that I use to end all my podcasts, which is pass on perfection and go for greatness. Our society is so obsessed with getting things just right, with being perfect all the time. But when you look at the greats, when you look at Michael Jordan, he took and missed over 9,000 shots in his career. Yet he is hailed as the greatest basketball player of all time by many people who are correct. Sorry, LeBron. You look at, so many other people who they weren't perfect, but they were great. And taking the monkey of perfection off your back, you are free to do your best. And if you are perfect, like if you are a bowler and you throw a 300 game once in a while, awesome. But being able to throw a 295 or 297, that's still great. You're still better than 99% of the bowlers out there. And so by pursuing greatness, by trying to be as good as you can be without worrying about being perfect, you might reach that perfection once in a while, but by being consistent in your attempts, you will attain greatness, and that will ultimately give you more happiness than if you try to be perfect all the time.
Yeah. I struggled with the whole perfectionism thing for a long time in my own life. And it was something a good friend of mine said to me once, was that perfectionism is the lowest standard you can hold yourself to, because it's unattainable, right? It's not a real thing. So if perfectionism is the lowest standard you can hold yourself to, and you want to hold yourself to high standards, you need to pick a new standard, right? You need to have something different that you're holding yourself to. And, so for me, it was learning how to, in my case, for my business, is learning how to ship a product that got the result that I wanted, right? And, not every little pixel had to be right on the sales page. Not every word in your book has to be perfect, right? Like it's, you have to get it to the point where it's good enough to do the job, right? Yes. It's good enough to do the job, and then you can iterate and become better. And if you can consistently get good at in my case, in shipping good product, then, it helps you grow your business a lot. So I love that. The pass on perfection and shoot for greatness. Is that right?
Yeah. And go for greatness. I'm a huge fan of alliteration. So I just like that. Yeah. I like that alliteration of pass on perfection and go for greatness.
I love it. So pass on perfection, go for greatness. So that is basically a wrap on our interview, but I do finish every interview off with a simple challenge that I call the Heroes Challenge. And I do this, it's a selfish thing, personally, to get access to new stories that I might not find on my own. So my question is simple. Do you have someone in your life or in your network that you think has a cool entrepreneurial story? Who are they? First names are fine, and why do you think they should come share their story here on our show?
I think my friend Ben comes to mind. I've met him within the podcast world on I believe you and I are on the same podcast Facebook group, correct? That's how you met?
Probably my my assistant who runs this podcast does all that for me, so probably.
Okay. Well, I met Ben through that podcast group, and or at least I met him and then I got him into it, but we've been connecting ever since on there, and he has a great story, and I think he would really serve your audience well. His name is Ben Eden.
Awesome. And, well, we'll see if we can reach out afterwards and see if we can get Ben to come on the show and share his story. And like I said, that's a wrap on our interview. But in comic books, there's always the crowd who's there to cheer on the acts of heroism and clap for the audience. So as we close, what I want to know is, where can people find you, right? If they want to hire you to speak to their group, or if they want to see some of the things that you teach, or I know you said you were working on a program, where can they find you? Where can they light up the bat signal, so to speak, and say, hey, Chris, I need your help? And more importantly than that, who are the right types of people to reach out, right? Like, what kind of audiences do you like to speak to? Is it schools? Is it businesses? Who are the right types of people to say, you know what, I would love to have Chris come and teach a little bit about the attitude of gratitude to our audience?
Thanks for asking, Richard. Right now, I'm focusing on speaking to students. Being a teacher, I find that I have a natural ability to connect with kids. And so I am reaching out to students, K-12, and also colleges. But I've also been told that corporations and the corporate world might also appreciate my story. So I might start reaching out in that realm as well. But people can find me at chrisdtgordon.com. And that's where they can find out about my speaking and coaching opportunities. They can also find me on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Instagram at Chris DT Gordon, Gordon. I try to keep it as simple as I can. And there's also my podcast called Scar Bearers. Not bears with scars, though that is visually awesome. It's called Scar Bearers, and where I talk about my experience with NF, and I interview people to talk about their physical and sometimes emotional scars and how they've recovered from them. And you can find that on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, a lot of the podcast places. And you recognize it because I use the Star Wars font.
Nice. Awesome. So thank you so much for coming on the show today, Chris. Really appreciate it. And if you're in our audience and you're looking, you have a group of students who might benefit from hearing Chris speak, make sure you reach out to him. It's chrisdtgordon.com. We'll make sure the links are in the show notes. And Chris, before we hit that stop record button, do you have any final words of wisdom for our audience?
You know, I wish I could think of something brand new to say, but I would just say, pass on perfection and go for greatness.
I love it. And I love the superhero outfit too. We'll see if we can find the link to that show and put it in the show notes as well for people who might be interested in what do you call it? He's the One Punch
Man
superhero. One Punch Man. There we go.
One Punch Man.
So One Punch Man. Awesome. Thank you very much, Chris, for coming on the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Richard. I really enjoyed it.